Hi everyone, this is Jill, one of the reference librarians from East Hampton Library, and this is the Haunted Libraries presentation. Bear with me, I'm going to share our screen. So welcome to Haunted Libraries of the U.S. And first we're going to start off with libraries are haunted, and the short answer is yes, and they generally fall into two categories. Category 1 is the building with a reputation. This is the library where a convenient murder, curse, or other tragedy has occurred. Library staff can then blame the odd noise, the occasional book falling off the shelf, or glitches in the air conditioning on the resident scapegoat. No one reports anything too spooky, and the children's librarians have a good time with it at story hour. Category 2 is the building without a reputation but where things happen. These are libraries where credible, responsible people observe enigmatic human shapes, hear disembodied voices, and witness other classic parapsychological events. Glib explanations about how the building must be settling ring about as hollow as those mysterious footsteps late at night on the upper floorboards. The library staff learns to live with its wraith, usually by accepting the paranormal as a normal working condition. This is a fun little meme that I found that says, "Ghost, ooh, I'm here to haunt your library." And the librarian replies, "Well, good, we could use another on this committee." And the ghost is startled that the librarian wants them there. Before we get started, I'm just going to make a quick note. You're going to hear me mention Carnegie Libraries several times throughout this presentation, so I wanted to just give a very brief overview of what a Carnegie Library was. Carnegie Libraries were built with the support of self-educated millionaire industrialist Andrew Carnegie, who lived from 1835 until 1919. Carnegie and the Carnegie Corporation provided funding for 1,681 public library buildings in 1,412 U.S. communities between 1889 and 1923. To Carnegie, libraries represented self-education, so a library gift should represent self-help. Carnegie provided the building, but the communities provided the land and tax support for the libraries. And a few times in this presentation, you'll hear me mention Carnegie Libraries. So in terms of states with the most haunted libraries, Pennsylvania tops the list with 17, and Texas comes in a close second at 16. I've tried to cover a wide range of libraries from all over the United States, and here are 25 of my favorites. Now, bear in mind that I am not an expert in this. This is just something I like to learn about. So let's get started. Number 1 is the Webb Memorial Public Library in Morehead City, North Carolina. This building was constructed in 1929 by local businessman Earl Webb as a commercial building that contained doctor's offices downstairs and a garment factory upstairs. His wife, a member of the Morehead Women's Club, asked her husband if they could move a small 300-book library into one of the upstairs rooms, and the library was born. In 1936, the Webb's son, Earl Jr., became ill and tragically died, and in his honor, the Webbs dedicated the building as the Earl W. Webb Jr. Memorial Library and Civic Center, and opened it to all the citizens of Morehead City for community use. Paranormal researchers consider the Webb, as it is called, to be ground zero for paranormal activity in Carteret County, North Carolina. Staff and patrons have observed books moving on their own, strange smells, changes in temperature, and evidence from EMF equipment, which detects electromagnetic fields. Locals believe it's the ghost of Earl Jr. that haunts the Webb building with activity continuing to this day. And the picture you will see in the bottom right is not actually a ghost picture. It's just an effects picture that someone took at that library to make it seem like a ghost. Next up is the North Portland Library in Portland, Oregon. So in 1912, the Carnegie Corporation of New York donated $60,000 for 4 new branch libraries, including one to replace North Albina Library. The land for a new North Portland library came from the generous gifts of many community members, and construction soon started. The building opened to the public in 1913 and was constructed in a Jacobean style. Staff and patrons have reported paranormal activity at the North Portland Library almost since its inception. The most famous of the hauntings is the Shadow Man. After a renovation in 2000, the library included a security room where guards can watch cameras throughout the building. It's reported that on a cold, stormy night in December, the 2 guards were about to step outside of the room for a break to the vending machine when one of them spotted a man sitting in one of the conference rooms. They went to check, and the room was empty. When they returned to the security room, the Shadow Man was again seated in the conference room. All security footage is recorded, so they had tapes to back up their story. Several staff members also report that a second-floor bathroom is haunted by a playful ghost that likes to turn on the hand dryer. One of the staff members reported that he jokingly asked the spirit to turn on the hand dryer and said, "I bet you a nickel you won't turn it on." Nothing happened, but when the staff member returned to his table in the break room, a nickel sat waiting for him. In another incident, the same staff member recalls that he brought a group of school kids up to the bathroom who were shooting a documentary on paranormal places. When he opened the door and said, "Here's the hand dryer that sometimes goes on by itself," the hand dryer promptly turned on. Number 3 on our list is the MILLISCENT Library in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. Built to look like a Gothic castle, the building was donated to Fairhaven in 1893 by oil tycoon Henry Huddleston Rogers in honor of his recently deceased daughter Millicent, who died at just 17 years old from heart failure. Millicent loved to read and had expressed a wish that her favorite vacation town have a good library. Contrary to popular rumors, her body is not interred within the foundation, but a sketch of her was laid with the building's cornerstone, and a stained glass window bears her likeness. You can actually see her picture and the stained glass window in the top right corner of the screen. Visitors have reported seeing a young woman roaming the hallways surrounded by a blue light. She has also been spotted in the windows of the tower section of the library. Staff have reported that there is a second ghost within the building, an eccentric janitor who is said to have died in the building and has been spotted in the basement. This is the Deep River Public Library in Deep River, Connecticut. This library was originally a home built in 1881 by prominent businessman Richard Pratt Spencer, who lived to be 90 years old. Spencer lived in the home with his second wife and 3 children until his death in 1910. The house, considered more of a mansion at the time, had exceptionally beautiful fireplaces, refined woodwork, and elegant touches, and parties were held there on a regular basis. When Spencer's widow died in 1932, a son sold the home to the Saybrook Library Association, which then in turn sold the building to the town for a small price in order to convert it into a library. Not much renovation has been done until 1995, when a children's addition was built to resemble the old porch, which had deteriorated. The library has experienced paranormal activity since the 1950s, and more than 30 different paranormal investigations have taken place within its walls. Most groups have recorded EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, or have captured photos or videos. EVPs have recorded voices repeatedly asking, "What is your name? What year is it?" and have sometimes been followed by flashes of light. Staff members have heard a child's laughter when the building was closed, smelled cigar smoke, and have witnessed a woman floating down the stairs and looking out from an upstairs window. Passers-by have also noted that the second floor looked like a party was going on when the building was in fact closed. The show Haunted Collector from the Sci-Fi Channel even filmed an episode at Deep River, and an investigator observed a female spirit, which was believed to be Mrs. Julia Spencer. Next up on the list is actually the U.S. Capitol Building in Washington, D.C. The U.S. Capitol Building has had a long and storied history with the paranormal. George Washington himself laid the cornerstone for the building in 1791, but it was the building's designer, William Thornton, that kicks off the building's history with the weird and paranormal. Mr. Thornton was not a professional architect. He was a distinguished polymath, or person of wide-ranging knowledge or intellect, and a doctor. He was called upon to save a dying George Washington, but was unable to arrive until after his death. Not one to be deterred, Mr. Thornton devised a plan to revive Washington from the dead, which included thawing him in cold water and giving him a blood transfusion from a lamb. Naturally, Martha Washington declined his offer. The building was once labeled the most haunted building in the world by the Philadelphia Press, and is believed to be haunted by numerous individuals and even a demonic cat that was spotted before the assassinations of Lincoln and Kennedy and before the stock market crash of 1929. What is now the Speaker's Hall, which is pictured in the lower left corner, was the original Library of Congress in 1800. It is said that the ghost of a male librarian haunts the hall, as well as the rooms to the west of the rotunda, searching for $6,000 in registered bonds, which he stashed in the pages of some obscure volumes. He never married and never had children, and retired from the library due to mental health concerns over the loss of his mother with whom he lived. He's been spotted roaming around looking for his lost money. It is said that when the library moved to its current location in the Jefferson Building in 1897, workers actually found money stashed within books as they moved the collection. Number 6 is the PARMLY Billings Memorial Library in Billings, Montana. And just so you know, the building that is pictured here now is actually the Western Heritage Center, but it was the original location of the PARMLY Billings Library. The building was built in 1901, and it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It was named after Parmly Billings, the son of town founder Frederick Billings. Parmly died suddenly at the age of 25. The library then moved to a building that was previously occupied by Billings Hardware and the Broadway Furniture Company. That building was demolished, and the now Billings Public Library is in an entirely new building. For the purposes of this program on haunted libraries, we're going to look at this original building pictured here from 1901. The original building has been said to be haunted by several spirits. A tall man dressed in white has been spotted in the staff room, and staff and visitors have spotted a female spirit wearing glasses. A man in work clothes has often been spotted on the second floor, and both a young man who whistles and a dark-haired woman have been spotted in the basement, which is pictured in the bottom right. Staff have often reported unexplained noises, swinging light cords, and a feeling of being watched in the basement. Staff have also reported hearing the sound of typewriter keys when no typewriters are in the building anymore. The most well-known spirit is a child named Priscilla. It's said that they will often find child-sized handprints in the attic, dust, and she has been spotted roaming through the building. This building is the Armstrong-Osborne Public Library in Talladega, Alabama. The Armstrong-Osborne Library opened its doors in 1908 with the help of a Carnegie grant, as well as a local resident, Louisa Jemison, who donated the land and $10,000 to ensure the completion of the library. In 1979, a new building was built next door and the library was moved. The original library building became the Heritage Hall Museum. Oddly enough, most of the hauntings are reported from the new building and not the original Carnegie building. Staff have reported things moving on their own and other visual phenomena. Doors have opened and closed by themselves, sometimes being pushed open with force and surprising staff members. Books often move, sometimes flying off of shelves, which has happened in front of numerous witnesses. Many people, both staff and patrons, have seen orbs, and the shadow-like apparition of a man has been spotted waving. Staff have named him Fred. The library houses a substantial Civil War collection, and staff note that most of the orbs and a lot of the activity seems to occur near that area of the library. This building is the new Hanover County Public Library in Wilmington, North Carolina. The new Hanover County Public Library has had a long and storied history in the city of Wilmington, moving from the original City Hall building in 1906 to several other buildings before finally settling into its current location, which was the former site of the original Belk department store, where the library opened its doors in 1981. The new Hanover County Public Library has a well-known Civil War collection, and it seems that at least one spirit haunting the building knows it too. Patrons and staff have seen a bearded, heavy-set man wearing 19th century garb near the collection. He is believed to be a lieutenant colonel in the 3rd Cavalry, 41st North Carolina Regiment during the Civil War, and once served as the mayor of Wilmington. Dubbed the Colonel, his portrait hung in the building and was often moved around the building when it was empty and no one was there. People have reportedly also heard footsteps that they believe is him walking in his boots on the upper floors. Staff have reported that upon entering the building in the morning, they will find files spread out when they themselves put everything away the night before. There's one book in particular, the papers of Zebulon Baird Vance, that always seem to be left out. They've dubbed this particular ghost the Researcher, and it seems that the Researcher also likes to play tricks on them. They've also seen a female spirit who sometimes walks through the aisles with a book cart. She has also reportedly been known to turn books backwards on the shelves or move things around. People have also reported taps on their shoulders and the sound of pages being turned when they are the only person in the area. Number 9 is the Umatilla County Public Library in Pendleton, Oregon. Umatilla County Public Library opened its doors in 1916 as a Carnegie Library in an Italian Renaissance Revival style building. The entrance of the building was modeled after the Pazzi Chapel at the Basilica di Santa Croce in Florence, Italy. Due to increased cost of upkeep and repairs, the library moved from its original building in 1996, and the Pendleton Center for the Arts moved in. Again, for this program, we're going to look at the original building pictured here, which is now the Pendleton Center for the Arts. And I will tell you the story of Ruth Cochran, assistant librarian and president of the Eastern Oregon Library Association. On October 11th, 1947, Ruth suffered a cerebral hemorrhage as she was closing the building. She went to the basement to rest, but soon became too weak to move or summon help. The next day, the custodian's wife found her still conscious, and she was taken to the hospital where she died, according to the Pendleton East Oregonian. Spooky sounds and a general feeling of unease have been reported throughout the building, and are mostly blamed on Ruth's ghost. A custodian who was in the library alone doing some painting heard the intercom system buzz repeatedly. On several other occasions, while he was the only person in the building, he has heard the intercom system buzz. The folklore is that it is Ruth in the basement trying to buzz someone to come and help her. Number 10 is the PHOENIXVILLE Public Library in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. The Phoenixville Library, another Carnegie Library, first opened its doors in 1902. Since that time, it has undergone several renovations, with the most recent being in 2012 when it renovated and expanded its children's library. Phoenixville Public Library is believed to be haunted by the spirits of at least 3 individuals. One has been described as a woman wearing a bustle dress and is believed to be the original librarian. An old man and his dog are seen slowly walking through the building, and a young girl is said to haunt the children's library. Staff have reported seeing a rocking chair rocking on its own. Another staff member remembers seeing an apparition, and then the front door open and the alarm go off when no one else was there. Staff have said that they will make sure all chairs are pushed in at the end of the night. Upon entering the building in the morning, not only are the chairs pulled back out as if someone sat in them, but they are also often rearranged. Number 11 is the Fort Concho Museum Library in San Angelo, Texas. Built in 1867, Fort Concho was constructed to protect settlers and the transportation routes between a chain of forts in the heartland of Texas. It was an active Army outpost from 1867 to 1889, and it is believed that some of its former inhabitants have never left. The former Bachelor Officers Barracks is now the museum library. Lights frequently turn on after hours. A librarian reports that she was working on a microfilm reader one evening, looking at the names of people who had died at the fort. The back door started opening, so she called out hello, and it stopped. No one came in, and no one was outside, but she stated that because it is an old wooden porch, you can clearly hear when someone is coming or going. She also distinctly heard the sound of someone cracking their knuckles. Another staff member always seemed to find herself locked out of a particular room. The interesting thing was, it was a restored 19th century lock that requires a key to unlock it, and she had the only copy at the time. Most believe these incidents are the work of Colonel Ranald Mackenzie, as he was a prominent officer at the time, known for conducting campaigns on local Comanche. He stayed in these barracks as it was a central point for him to oversee the fort. He was well known for constantly cracking his knuckles. Another frequent visitor to Officers Row is Edith, the 12-year-old daughter of Colonel Benjamin Grierson. Edith passed away in an upstairs bedroom and is often seen playing jacks in her bedroom. She looked so alive to a delivery person bringing flowers to the bedrooms that he remarked to the woman at the front desk how well behaved her daughter was. Now, most everybody looking at these pictures are going to say, really, that building is haunted? But I will tell you a story about the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The northeast corner of the main branch of the Allen County Public Library sits where the Brackenridge House once stood. Brackenridge family and their house saw its fair share of tragedy. In 1891, the patriarch, Judge Joseph Brackenridge, died in the house of natural causes. In 1893, the son Robert went out into the barn to shoot rats. His brother found him the next morning with a gunshot wound to the right temple. In 1895, Robert's grandmother collapsed on the stairs and died. After that, matriarch Eliza sold the house to the city in 1898. The house was torn down in the mid-1960s, and the oldest part of the library sits right where the house stood. A children's librarian stayed after hours to work on a project and recalls hearing the door to a stairway open. She heard footsteps, and the door opened again, but when she called out, no one answered. This particular door requires an employee's badge, and it beeps when you swipe the badge. There were no beeps. Staff have also reported seeing the spirit of a construction worker wandering the building on several occasions. This library houses documents from the Lincoln collection, so they believe some of the activity they experienced might be connected to that. Next on the list is the CAIRO Public Library in Cairo, Illinois. The Queen Anne-style building that houses the CAIRO Public Library was a gift to the citizens of Cairo from Mrs. Eliza Safford in 1884. In the 100-plus years of the library's existence, only 7 librarians have served. Few changes have been made to the library since it was built. Cairo Public Library is believed to be haunted by a spirit a young patron has named Toby. Toby is usually found on the second floor, hanging around the special collections room. A children's librarian heard a chair squeak in front of her as if someone had sat down, but no one was there, and they attributed that to Toby. Staff and patrons have also heard footsteps, had lights turn on and off by themselves, and watched a rocking chair rock on its own. 2 staff members once saw a ghostly light rise up from behind a desk, past an office, and go into the stacks. This is the Houston Public Library in Houston, Texas, specifically the Julia Idison Building. The Idison Building opened in 1926 as Houston Public Library's central library. Designed as a Spanish revival, it replaced the prior Carnegie building. It is currently listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The building is named for Julia Bedford Idison, who served as the system's first head librarian for 40 years. Today, this particular building houses the library archives, manuscripts, and Texas and local history departments. Now, it's not often that you get a complete resume of your resident ghost, but in the case of the Houston Public Library, that's exactly what we have. The afterlife resident of the Idison building is a man named Julius Frank Kramer, and not only do they know his full name, they also know how he died, a pulmonary hemorrhage. The library actually has a file on Julius that they will provide to interested patrons. He didn't have a long work history, but one thing was similar throughout. His place of work was also listed as his place of residence. He started out as the custodian of the original Carnegie building and eventually became the security guard / gardener / custodian / janitor of the Idison building until his death in 1936. The side street entrance of the building is listed as his last known place of residence. Julius was known to practice playing his violin after hours, a practice that continues to this day. Allegedly, staff have heard uplifting Strauss waltzes being played after the library has closed. Sheet music is occasionally found scattered on the library floors. People also often hear the sound of a dog's nails clicking, which they believe to be Mr. Kramer's German Shepherd. Number 15 is the Jefferson Market Library in New York City, and that is a part of the New York Public Library system. Originally a courthouse, the Jefferson Market Library has served the Greenwich Village community for over 30 years. The building, a New York City landmark, was designed in a Victorian Gothic style. It was erected along with an adjacent prison and market during the years 1875 to 1877 and cost the city almost $360,000. What the city got for its money, in addition to an architectural gem, it was voted one of the 10 most beautiful buildings in America by a poll of architects in the 1880s, was a civil court on the second floor where the adult reading room is now, and a police court, now the first floor children's room. The beautiful brick-arched basement, which you see pictured in the bottom left, is now the reference room, but was used back then as a holding area for prisoners on their way to jail or trial. The building sat adjacent to the Jefferson Market Prison, which later became the New York Women's House of Detention. Actress Mae West was tried here soon after on obscenity charges when her Broadway play Sex became a target of the Society for the Suppression of Vice. West received a $500 fine, 1 day next door in the Women's House of Detention, and 9 days at the workhouse on Welfare Island, which is now Roosevelt Island. After sitting empty for decades, this building was saved from demolition and converted into a library that opened its doors in 1967. Visitors and staff have reportedly seen figures walking along the clock tower balcony, which is an area that is closed to the public. People have also reported a female spirit who will try to get their attention, wave its smile at them, and then disappear. Female spirits have also been spotted roaming the garden next door, which is where the detention center stood. It is believed that all of these restless spirits are the spirits of former inmates. Number 16 is the Los Angeles Public Library, and we're actually going to be looking at two branches within that system. The Central Library, which is pictured on the left, and the Cypress Park branch, which is pictured on the right on the top. Prior to the original library building being built, the property was home to a women's teaching college called the California Branch State Normal School, or just the Normal School. They trained future teachers and started operations in 1882. That building was demolished in 1924 to make way for the library. The original Los Angeles Public Library, Central Library, was built in 1926. The building suffered from overcrowding and physical deterioration and was slated to be demolished and replaced. After much debate, the building was saved and a significant addition was added on. Just 3 years after a plan was in place for the addition, the library suffered a terrible arson fire. And Susan Orlean's bestseller, The Library Book, tells that dramatic story. The building finally reopened in 1993. So staff are frequently taken on a stairwell safety tour that guides them through a maze of long, lonely corridors snaking under and around the staff side of the building. You can see one of those corridors pictured in the bottom right corner. Staff have frequently reported seeing apparitions of women dressed in turn-of-the-century garb in those tunnels. Whispers, knocks and bangs, and moving shadows have also been observed. The Cypress Park branch, which is pictured in the top right, has been listed among LA's most haunted places. This building is pretty new. It opened in 2001. A translucent male has been seen floating near the fireplaces. Ghostly whispers are heard in the men's room, and people have reported lights turning on and off and shadows moving in windows when the building is closed. Of course, the only proven ghosts seen at the Central Library are the movie magic ones created by the Ghostbusters film crew. The basement of Central Library, pictured here, and several other spots throughout the building were featured in the movie to represent the New York Public Library. This very nondescript building is the Harvey Public Library in Harvey, North Dakota. The Harvey Public Library was built in the late 1980s on the former site of the Eberlein home. In 1931, Sophie Eberlein was murdered by her second husband in the bedroom of their house. It's believed that Sophie has remained behind to make her presence known within the library. Lights constantly have been known to turn on and off, something electricians cannot find a reason for. A librarian once had a favorite colorful book she would use for story time, and she always put it in the same spot to easily access it. One day it was gone, and for weeks it remained missing. Then one day the librarian walked into the room and found the book sitting in plain sight. Perhaps Sophie got tired of hearing the same story over and over again. Staff members' keys have gone missing, and staff will often say, "Okay, Sophie, I need to get home now," and their keys will reappear shortly thereafter. A patron once came in wanting to donate items connected to the family of her first husband who came from the Harvey area. After talking with the woman, staff discovered her first husband was actually the grandson of Sophia Eberlein. The woman's current husband, her second husband, came into the building and immediately reported feeling a sense of unease and said there was a presence in the building that didn't like men, or maybe just second husbands. He eventually left the building because the feeling got so strong that he got sick. Number 18 is the Blanche Skiff Ross Memorial Library in Nevada, Missouri. This library is located on the campus of the Cotty College for Women, and prior to being a college, these buildings were the site of an American sanatorium where patients suffering long-term illness, most likely tuberculosis, were treated. Obviously, these buildings became very well acquainted with death. A student studying music at the college, Vera Neitzert, passed away at the school due to a candy-making accident that caused severe burns. She was treated and died in the old sanatorium where the library is now located. People have said they've seen a spirit, believed to be Vera, roaming the library and other parts of the campus. Staff and students have also reported hearing piano music late at night. While some believe it to be Vera, others believe it could be the former music director, Madame Blitz, who drank carbolic acid and died. 19 is the Bernardsville Public Library in Bernardsville, New Jersey. The building that formerly houses the Bernardsville Public Library for 90 years was initially called the Vealtown Tavern, and that is pictured in the 3 pictures on the top and to the left. Currently, the building is in a new location, which is pictured in the bottom right. Constructed in the 1700s, the tavern was a stopover for the weary and thirsty travelers and served the officers and men of the Continental Army. The ownership of the tavern changed many times, but the lore of the sturdy clapboard building on Morristown Road has endured through more than 2 centuries. Currently, that building houses a fitness center. Vealtown Tavern was the scene of a tragic love affair between the innkeeper's daughter Phyllis and a tenant, Dr. Byram. Just after the two were married, Dr. Byram was hanged by General Anthony Wayne for being a British spy, and his lifeless body was delivered to the tavern. Not knowing what was in the large pine box, Phyllis opened it. On seeing the bug-eyed corpse of her beloved, she became hysterical and suffered a nervous breakdown. The ghost of a woman in a long white dress has been seen frequently throughout the building. She started making appearances in 1974, around the time the building was renovated. Her weeping is still heard in the building. A 3-year-old boy once saw her and was spotted waving to her and saying hi. Phyllis was actually so active when the library was still at that location that the staff issued her a library card. Number 20 is the Hoyt Library in Saginaw, Michigan. The Hoyt Public Library was a gift to the city of Saginaw by one of its most prominent citizens, Jesse Hoyt. In his will, Jesse left the city a sum of $100,000 for the establishment of a library on a site he owned. The Hoyt Public Library was opened in November of 1890. The site, prior to being owned by Jesse Hoyt, was the home of the original Saginaw Jail, which was known for its violent and ruthless inmates, often overcrowded during the lawless lumber era. The Hoyt Library is considered one of the most haunted locations in the Midwest. Many paranormal investigations have been done at the site, and a documentary was even made about one of the investigations. The building is believed to be haunted by a number of spirits. Visitors have heard the sound of typewriter keys coming from behind a door that leads to a set of stairs that is no longer used. Multiple patrons, when asking for customer service, have said they were aided by an elderly woman who brought them back to the desk and who they thought worked at the library. When they asked other staff members to thank her, no one had passed by the desk to enter or leave the room they were in. They believed that woman to be the spirit of the first librarian, Harriet Ames. Other ghosts are there as well. The spirit of a child is said to haunt the west wing of the building. The ghost of a man in uniform is said to roam the halls where the Civil War artifacts are found. People have experienced books falling off shelves, cold spots, lights going on and off on their own, and more. Something out of the ordinary happening is considered a daily/nightly occurrence. During the last century, several deaths have actually occurred within the library, and the spirits of these people are believed to still be in the building. There are actually areas of the building where some staff will refuse to go. Number 21 is the Peoria Public Library in Peoria, Illinois. The Peoria Public Library was built in 1894 on the former site of the Gray home. Local history says that Mrs. Mary Stevenson Gray lived in a home here around 1830 before family and financial hardships led to a foreclosure. Mrs. Gray was forced to leave her home, and she cursed the property and all of its future owners before she left. Some believe her curse came true. The first 3 library directors all died under unusual circumstances. The first died in a streetcar accident in 1915. The second died of a heart attack after a heated debate at a library board meeting in 1921. And the third committed suicide in 1924 by swallowing arsenic. In 1966, the library was actually demolished and a new one was built in its place, but many of the ghosts are said to still reside here as a result of Mrs. Gray's curse. Reports say staff members have heard their names being called when they are alone in the stacks or they feel cold drafts. Apparitions of a former library director have also been seen in the basement doorway. Number 22 is the Sweetwater County Library in Green River, Wyoming. In 1906, the Sweetwater County Library was built in Green River with a $20,000 Carnegie grant. In 1980, the library moved to a larger location 2 blocks east of the original library, where it remains to this day. And this is where the story gets interesting. The library, built in 1980, was built on top of a cemetery dating from the 1890s. And yes, you heard me right, on top of a cemetery. The cemetery was the first official cemetery for Green River, and after a few short years, it ran out of space. The city of Green River purchased 80 acres of land from the U.S. government with the intent to move the cemetery, which is now called the Riverview Cemetery. Once the Riverview Cemetery was prepared and ready for use, graves and tombstones in the original cemetery were excavated and reburied in the new cemetery. The city of Green River passed an ordinance that required all of the bodies to be removed. Due to a natural spring that runs through the area down into the Green River, the land is soft and constantly moving. Because of the constant movement, a lot of the graves shifted, and those people were never removed from the original cemetery. It also believed that there are some bodies which were never recovered because of fear of smallpox disease. Now, as the years progressed, the land was used as a park until temporary housing was built in 1944 with the return of World War II veterans. The housing was then torn down in 1956, and during the building and demolition of that housing, human remains were found and reburied at the Riverview Cemetery. The lot sat vacant for many years and had a swing set that local children would play on. In 1979, the Sweetwater County Library was built on the lot. During the excavation, crews working on the project discovered more human remains, including a skull with red hair. There are still instances where remains will surface due to the shifting land, and in 1996, they did find more remains while doing pipeline work. Today, there are actually still people buried in the back corner of the library. The building is said to be haunted by a number of beings, from children to a dog and a cat. Almost since the day they've opened, they've had lights go on and off by themselves. Several staff members have seen electric typewriters and computers type on their own. Changes in temperature are often reported, and voices have been heard telling people to be quiet and whispering staff members' names. The staff actually keep a ghost log, which is available to view at the circulation desk. Entries are being made to this day, and here's a few of the examples. Mickey, a staff member. I heard my name whispered several times, but no one was asking for me. When I told other staff about it, they said they had heard their name whispered many times in the last 2 days, and no one was there. Another staff member. I was in the ladies' room when I heard what sounded like someone tapping their shoe. I knew there was no one else in there, so I tapped mine 3 times. There was maybe a 15-second pause, and I heard 3 taps in response. I tried again, but nothing happened. 2 patrons. Me and Katie were sitting back in the children's corner and felt our coats being tugged. Then we heard music playing, like the kind you play at a funeral, but when we went to check, there was no music playing. We had a poetry jam at the Sweetwater County Library on the evening of the 18th of April. After the show was over, there were several volunteers helping clean up. A man approached me and asked if there was another librarian working that he hadn't met yet. I assumed he meant during the day and asked what she looked like. He began to describe her as having black curly hair that was styled kind of high up on her head, and he said that she wore glasses. Well, I was stumped and asked if she had worked earlier that day. He said, no, right now, I just saw her. I said, wait a minute, you just saw her? There are no other librarians working tonight. Was she a real woman or a ghost woman? He said, I don't know, that's why I asked. And I said, where did you see her? Show me. Well, we put a lot of the items that we do not need in the back hallway, and this guy had been back there alone retrieving some of it. There was a light on under the stairs. However, the light in the stairwell was off, and it was there on the landing in the darker part of the stairwell, at the top of the bottom flight of stairs, that he saw her. He said she was so solid he thought she was real, and that she wore a long white dress and just held eye contact with him for a couple of minutes, then smiled and went upstairs. Later we turned on the light, and he noticed the picture of our first librarian in Green River that hangs in the stairwell there, and said that the woman he saw looked just like her. However, her hair was styled differently. There was definitely a presence in that area, for right as he showed me where he saw her, the hair on my arms stood up. And you can actually check out their ghost blog yourself at sweetwaterlibraries.com/sclsblogs/ghostblog. Up next, number 23, is the Easton Area Public Library in Easton, Pennsylvania. In 1895, a library association was formed in Easton with the purpose of providing a library space for the residents. The association received a Carnegie grant and had to find a suitable piece of land. The library opened in 1903 on the best available piece of property in town, which also turned out to be the oldest graveyard in town, which by that time was no longer in use. That cemetery, the German Reformed Cemetery, was the final resting place of 514 souls. Families of the deceased were tasked with moving the remains of their loved ones to make room for the library. However, about 30 bodies remained unclaimed. Two of those bodies, Elizabeth Bell Mammy Morgan and Easton City founder William Parson, were actually moved to other parts of the grounds. The remaining 28 were unceremoniously put in a cement vault along with other unclaimed body parts, creating an unmarked mass grave in 1903. There are sources who claim that only 11 bodies were put in the vault and the remaining bodies were left where they were found, but most believe that all of those bodies were removed and put in the vault. The library then actually paved over the vault and made it a parking lot. So the vault and some of the remaining graves that were left were paved over. People have reported seeing the restless spirit of Mammy Morgan looking for her final resting place. Doors will open and shut, sometimes with force. Books fly off the shelves, and cold hands have been felt playing with hair. File cabinets have been heard opening and closing on their own. Number 24 is the Willard Library in Evansville, Indiana. Opening in 1885 on donated land from Willard and Lucinda Carpenter, the Willard Library is the oldest public library in the state of Indiana. Willard Carpenter laid out in a letter to the trustees how he was donating the land for the purpose of a public library to benefit the citizens of Evansville, and that as per his instructions, the library should be named the Willard Library. He was inspired by the Emma Willard School of Troy, New York, and always wanted to name an educational institution Willard. The Willard Library is somewhat famously haunted by the ghost of the Gray Lady. You can see her pictured in the two pictures on the right-hand side of the screen. The Gray Lady is thought to be Louise Carpenter, who is the daughter of the founder of the library, Willard Carpenter. When Willard Carpenter passed away, he left the entirety of his estate to his businesses and the library. Louise Carpenter sued the library board for what she thought was hers, claiming that her father was not in a sound state of mind when he wrote his last will and testament. Louise Carpenter lost the case. Now she's believed to haunt the library until she gets what she is owed. The Gray Lady was first spotted in 1937. A custodian arrived in the middle of the night to stoke the furnace in the basement. He put his light down, and when he picked it back up, he reported there was a woman in a long gray dress with a veil over her face standing in front of him. As he was supposed to be the only person in the building, he said something to her, and she disappeared around the corner. He is actually the only known employee to quit because of her. She's known to haunt specific rooms in the building. The building is 3 stories tall, and she's been spotted on 2 of the 3 levels. She's been seen upstairs in the local history department quite a bit. She's also been seen downstairs in the children's department and in the hallways downstairs. The children's department is considered the most haunted spot in the building, especially the story pit area. And she's also been known to play with the elevators, as people on the first floor will note that they move on their own. If the Gray Lady decides to grace you with her presence, you might experience one or all of the following: the smell of perfume, the feeling of cold, unexplained noises, books and furniture being moved, the feeling of touch on hair and earrings, odd items found in the library, and the water turned on and off in the restrooms. The Gray Lady is actually so popular that the library has set up a ghost cam throughout several rooms she is known to visit. Anyone can go onto the site, which is willardghost.com, and click on a room she has been known to frequent to see for themselves if they can spot her. And on the right hand side of the screen, these are 2 screen captures from the ghost cams of what is believed to be the Gray Lady, and both of these photos were actually taken when the building was closed for the day or night, as evidenced in the bottom picture. And last but not least, number 25 is the library I am currently sitting in, the East Hampton Library in East Hampton, New York. The library moved to its present location at the corner of Main Street and Buell Lane in 1912 on land donated by Mary Lorenzo Woodhouse. The architect, Eimer Embry, designed the building, which was also donated by the Woodhouses. The library was designed in a neo-Elizabethan style, since many residents of that time wanted East Hampton architecture to conform to that of a pre-17th century Kentish village, similar in looks to the one the original settlers had left behind. The library has undergone several additions throughout the years, with the most recent construction addition being the Children's Room and Baldwin Room in 2014. Most of our experiences have come from the staff. Staff have heard voices and footsteps, doors opening on their own when no one else is around. A page reported being touched on the leg when she was shelving in fiction. No one was behind her. We frequently feel cold spots when walking through different areas. A light fixture came off the wall in the reading room, which is pictured on the bottom right, and instead of falling straight down off the wall, it actually flew forward. Security video has captured books falling in the children's room as if someone pushed them. Staff have also reported hearing a child crying after hours. We've actually had the Long Island paranormal investigators here for 2 separate investigations. At the first, in that reading room, an investigator asked if there was someone there to make a noise, and there was a knock. When asked to do it again, there was a second knock. A second audio clip came from the children's room, where a voice recorder captured the sound of blocks on the table when no toys were out. Static cameras went off a number of times by themselves. 3 separate investigators reported seeing someone when they were by themselves. 1 saw a woman peeking out of the young teen room. 1 saw a child run from the children's room back entrance to our toddler area. And 1 described a small boy sitting next to him in fiction, which is pictured in the top right. At the second investigation, a few EVP recordings were received. 1 sounded female, and the second sounded male and forcibly told the investigators to get out. We've actually had children come into the library and point down an empty hallway and ask if the person at the other end works there too, and nobody was there. And here is our video of the books falling. So there's actually a reflection of the IT person who was watching the security video, and you can see him move. That's kind of the yellowish reflection there, but I will play it again for you. This particular bookcase does not have windows by it. It does not have any air vents by it. It's just a small bookcase there with some books on top. And the Long Island investigators actually said that it was a compelling piece of evidence because it looks like the initial book, the first to fall over, was pushed. And I'll play it again for you. Now, at the time that this video was taken, the only person in the building was our janitor at the time. He had actually walked in from the other side of the room, which is a considerable distance away from this bookshelf. He walked in to see those books fall off the bookshelf and promptly turned around and left. I hope you've enjoyed our dive into the spooky world of libraries and that inspires you to visit some of the libraries shown here or others on your travels. I hope everybody has a good night and have a happy Halloween.